Now, to continue to disagree on everything about skill systems.
Yes.
I think we need to plan out some, I guess, mission statements or some sentences that define what we're trying to accomplish so we can kind of...
That's my plan right now. Come to some
Get on.
overarching agreements of where we want to get to, so that at least we have the same roadmap.
Yeah, it turns out that's helpful.
Yeah. It was fun to just throw us all in there and see what happens, though. Throw them in the deep end, see who swims.
I still like my keep your successes system. I'm going to build a game with that. Blackjack. Hookers.
You know what? Forget the game and the blackjack. All right. So I think our first major sticking point that we came to, and hi, Ward and Lurkers. Hey, guys. Almost 2 years. Thanks for the support, Rage. I love you doing the show with me. You too, Pseudo. I would have said it to you right away as well, but you didn't just resub, so it wasn't just like in my face. Thank you so much for all the support, Pseudo. And I love having you on the show with me.
Hey, isn't Yo subscribed?
Did it? God damn it, bot! Why are you so confused all the time?
Well, I mean, good news is I may have landed an extremely lucrative contract. So if I end up getting that, then I'm going to take a couple of months and just work on RageBot once I've done it.
That's good. That's
nice.
good. So I want to quickly show you how that works. So I'm going to go into events. Here, I'll pull it right up here. This is how it all looks, all right? Subscribed, event, edit, pulls up the interface. This is all the stuff that happens. So, welcome to the table, target username. At least the target username used to always work. But apparently target username was Yo this time. and then we have username. Oh no, that was welcome to the table, target user. No, that must have been up. Yeah, okay. And then we have just the username being printed. Up here we have welcome to the table, so that's part of that. The weight, and then this is just the image. Oh, that's a subscribe. That's my problem. This is a resubscribe. Difference. So, target user total months subbed is always 0. That's the one that comes up as 0 all the time. It's actually target user total months subbed. So, I don't know what I can do to fix that.
That's a really bad variable name is what that is.
Oh yeah. Target user name subscribed at target user sub tier. So target user name, if you said Yo subscribed, target user name is what returned Yo for that sub.
Which means that the message was actually the username out of Twitch's API.
Yeah. No, it just means they have pulled
or
their
they haven't mapped
shit
something
wrong.
correctly.
Yeah, their shit's just mapped completely wrong. Completely wrong. But when I manually shoot it off, it seems to work.
Right, because the manual thing is going to be inside the... it's going to be run inside that program.
Yep.
And just display it. It's not actually going to take an API result.
Yeah, it's not pulling the return down. So either Twitch's API is mangled, which means every bot should show wrong, but mine's the only one that does. So I'm pretty sure the API is returning right, and they're just mapping things really weird somewhere in between from when they get the return from the request to when it gets mapped into the values. Something's messed up, because when you hit play and it hard codes those values for the test, that actually works. So,
and this is why you never mess with the return from the API ever, because otherwise you run into errors like this and they're impossible to solve.
So I'm just going to use a different bot, even though I really like that one because it lets me do fun stuff. Like we can come in here and go to channel points, and then I can add command to create new channel point reward. Right, and this is going to show up in the channel points that you can redeem on the channel that you're generating all the time. You can see there's one there right now that's called test for 1 that I just made from this. And then that allows me to tie this into all sorts of media on my side. So I can trigger pop-ups on the screen, and I can trigger audio sounds, and I can trigger videos to play and things to change on the stream.
Hey, Kuro.
And I can't redeem that, unfortunately, so luckily it's only one. But this actually allows me to link those redemptions to bot commands, which allows me to trigger scripts and API calls and whatever I want. So I was thinking I could totally use that to trigger API calls to update games in the list, and I was going to work on all this, but then the basic messaging of the bot didn't work, and I was like, fuck it!
So hopefully I'll have some time to work on RageBot soon.
Yeah, that would be lovely. Hey, Kuro. So nice to see you. I'm sorry we didn't play Valheim last night. We will play Valheim tonight. I promise. It's not my fault. It's all Kerbal Space Program's fault. We'll play any game for 150k, eh? I'll be saving for that. You gonna tell me ahead of time what it is? You got an idea? You might want to slightly run it by me before you spend the points, because I have played a lot of games, and we try to focus on blind plays. So I could just be like, oh yeah, I've played that.
Yeah, I've played that to death, actually. I think I'm done.
Well, if the whole purpose is like to do blind plays and someone chooses like FF6, like, yeah, it's not blind, sorry.
It's kind of the opposite of blind.
Yeah, I kind of play that game yearly, 100%. I'm still the only person I've ever met that has done 100% Gao jump list.
God, that's just, it takes so long. It takes so long. And the manipulations are even harder to do on friggin' emulator because everything runs faster.
No, actually they're easier because you have quicker saves, and the manipulation on what comes up in the Velt is pretty formulaic.
Oh, is it not frame specific?
Nope.
I thought you had to. Oh, okay. No, I'm totally wrong. Totally wrong.
It's RNG for the battle after the next battle.
Yeah,
is what it is. So you just there's a chunk of like 30 different sets of potential battles. So like first you'll get one of the 5 battles from 1, then you'll get one of the 5 battles from 2, then you'll get one of the 5 battles from 3, then you'll get one of the 5 battles from 4, then you'll get one of the 5 battles from 5. Doing all of Realm's draw abilities is actually just something that's going to happen while you're doing Gao Jump if you just throw Realm in there, because you have to encounter every single enemy in the game twice to do Gao Jump. So what you do is, like, say you're missing one of the fights on 3, you save before your fight on 1, or save before your fight on 2, plow through your fight on 2, hope you get the 3 fight, load, plow through your fight on 2, hope you get the 3 fight. The 2 fight will always be the same, and the 3 one will change every time. You just keep on going through until you get the right one, and then save, and then just keep random. If I had the points, I'd make you slog through the derp that is SNES Draken. I don't slog, though, you know this. These games are just like, flush. I have played a
Cartoons channel.
Yeah, I have played a small amount of Draken. I'd try it again, but I don't remember being a massive fan. I'm not actually a huge CRPG fan. They have to be really, really good for me to like them. If it's going to be an average game, a JRPG is more likely. And for Path of Exile, yes, I'd just do the whole campaign. Like, if you wanted Path of Exile, it wouldn't be blind at all. But I'm happy to run around with I'm happy to run around with my silver kiwi, and we can do like a summoner. What's the mode called now? I forgot the name of the mode where you're not allowed to trade with anyone or interact with anyone.
Solo self-found.
Yeah, SSF, solo self-found. Thank you. I can do like an SSF summoner run or something, because I used to do that every season. It's rougher than 20 grit sandpaper. Yep. Yeah, we try to play good games. All right, skill system. Let's figure some things out. So
what are our goals here? Let's lay out some design goals.
Yeah. So we already went D6 over D20 because of that 5% fail, 5% succeed permanent. We don't know if we're going to have a crit success or fail yet. That's why there's little dashes next to them. Because at one point we were like, well, do we need crits? So we kind of need to philosophize around the crit idea. And then the other major issue right now is, do we want to do die versus die or total versus total? So rolling a bunch of dice, do we want to compare individual dice where it's just 1 to 6 to 1 to 6, or do we want to be adding them up where if we're rolling like 5 dice, we're dealing with values of 1 to 30? We're going to get a much more normalized middle distribution on that. I don't know if we want the more normalized middle distribution rather than a die versus die setup.
Yeah, there is some downside to that because the median distribution will change based on how many die are being rolled, and like it's impossible to roll a 7 on one die.
Yep.
So
that's why I kind of like the Risk approach, where they kind of go dice versus dice. Shadowrun starts to take that approach. It's just success on dice.
It's an interesting thing to talk about because you need to have an outline for how to compare die, or say that die must be rolled sequentially.
Yeah. So one thing we talked about was the only ever being allowed to have one die more than your opposing roll. Another thing we looked at was counting the same number of dice as the opposing roll, but rolling all your dice, which is kind of what Risk does. Like, you're not allowed to just have infinitely more dice than the other person. You get one die more than them and you lose a couple units, but you have that advantage over and over and over again on rolls. So how it would kind of look is I roll 5, you roll 2 on your opposing, you get your 2 dice, I get the 2 highest out of my 5. And that's sort of your advantage for having more dice. You don't get a, I've rolled more dice than you, so I'm gonna win, because there's no way you could possibly roll more than me even if I roll ones. That can't happen. That way.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. It does bring back the sort of variance and anticipation of like your die rolls are actually meaningful, which is what I was trying to achieve with the add up the numbers on the dice for your degree of success.
For degree of success, I was thinking if we don't go the number route, we could look at something like number of successes required. So then your degree of success is how many of the successes you need that you got.
But then how do we, like, that would necessitate all numbers being very small.
Mm-hmm. I'm okay with that.
Small numbers are hard to balance.
They can be. It's a tightrope. It's a tightrope because the smaller the number, the harder to balance. I understand this because in computer games you want big life totals because it's way easier to manage. But once you go from computer to pen and paper, then it's all of a sudden human math, and too big a number becomes onerous, too small of a number, not enough variance. So where do we want to sit at?
The middle ground that I'm thinking is like most things should be in the tens. Because that's going to be easy enough to do math on. You don't need to worry about triple digits. But you do get the advantage of having just like that bit more buffer area to work with. So it's not like the difference between a 2 and a 3 is enormous, because that's another 50%.
Yeah.
Versus 13 like 13 against 16 sort of thing.
Yeah. So let's here. I'm going to get you guys into this real quick. First panel, edit, follow along here, save, on, play. Okay, now you can all jump in too. So let's start with, let's make an area here called truths. Shall we? That seems like a good one to have. Why would you? I don't. Stupid thing. All right. What do we have for truth? What do we actually know about the game? Using D6.
Yeah, we know we're using D6 because that changes the success and failure rates.
Numbers small enough to do head math. Numbers big enough to balance.
And we want combat to be more streamlined than, well, combat and skill interactions to be more streamlined than in the D20 system.
I don't know if you can get them more streamlined than D20. We're trying to get better numbers than D20, I think. I think more streamlined than Shadowrun.
Sure.
Streamlining feels to me like the strength of D20. That is what it was made to do.
Yeah, it succeeds in some ways and fails in others.
I agree. But compared to 2.5, oh my god, is it simple.
Yes, this is very true.
I want to do this. Okay, roll a D8, 2 D10s, a D6, and flip a coin.
Whereas 4 sort of went a little bit back in that direction with the skill and combat systems. Oh, 4 was a thing.
At least it didn't have Thaco.
This is true.
And let's look at Thaco for a real quick second, because I think there's a good lesson to be learned here. Because Thaco was a pain in the fucking ass math. It was a bitch. All the time. People would miss math all the time when they're trying to figure out their Thaco. And it would slow down combat. And the biggest thing is, it wasn't that it was big complex numbers, it was that it was a lot of adding negatives and subtracting negatives. And it just got confusing. You know, I have Thaco, I need a 5 to hit AC 0, and they have AC -2. Do I need a 3 or a 7?
That calculation is not as simple as it would seem.
It was super confusing. So we want to avoid that. So let's say no negatives. Can we agree with that? No negatives?
So are we talking no negatives as in there is no way to negatively modify a roll?
No using negative numbers in our maths. We can subtract a number, but not use a negative number. There's a difference.
Okay, yeah.
The numbers have to be whole, unsigned ints within the game. You can subtract an unsigned int, but you cannot have a negative unsigned int. That's why I used that reference.
Does this mean we can underflow? Can I
Yes.
get so weak I become strong?
Yes. If you manage to roll less than 1, you break the game.
Or, land your die on its corner in the pip of another die.
Yes! Am I the only human that's ever done this?
I mean, probably not.
Probably not, but I'm the only human I've ever met, so I'm gonna go with it. All right. So skill. Kuro, Punk, Talesha. I know Talesha has ideas. That big, beautiful brain floating around out there. You play enough pen and paper. You've played Shadowrun. You've played every system we're talking about. You went too smart. Brain got too big. Careful.
Yep. Terminal intelligence. You're going to be smart forever.
Hey, Troll Banana, welcome. Welcome. Nice to see you here. We are discussing... Oh, I better turn my camera back on. I was just going to... and get those ideas flowing, but we are working on our own pen and paper system. We've played everyone under the sun, and we found all of them to be lacking in some way. So what's more fun than trying to make them better? Will we succeed? Probably not. Will we have fun? Hell yeah!
Will there also be arguments?
Oh,
Probably.
yeah! What do you mean, will there be? There already has been! Have you looked at the without numbers systems? No, I seriously have not looked at the without number system yet, and I'd love to have your input on what we're working with from your without number influence. Talesha has a, can I live in your brain? My brain is like a kaleidoscope of guitar riffs and barbecue. Oh, that does sound
that
delicious.
sounds like a good time to me.
It does sound delicious. Yeah, I unfortunately haven't yet. And I don't know if Rage is familiar with it, but Talesha actually pointed me to a pen and paper system that does not use numbers.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. And I'm super interested in how they did it. And I'm like, did they use something to like pretend to be numbers? At which point they used numbers without using numbers? Or I'm curious. I'm curious. It's a cool idea. It still uses a D20 for hit, but 3d6 is your standard rolls. Okay, but you said without numbers systems. There's infinite worlds. Oh, I see.
Multiverse nonsense.
Gotcha. Also means my mind isn't geared for pen and paper since my experience with it pretty much nil besides what I've encountered in PC games. Your input is valuable. No matter what you think, your input is valuable. We need it. Even if you don't come up with the idea, your input from your experience could be what pushes us to the idea.
It's true. And we do need people who have a different point of view than we do. That's very, very important.
Can't count them. Do you want to fucking play? I mean, I always want to play. I don't know what the question is, but yeah, I want to play. That's what I'm doing right now.
We got Valheim progression after this, though.
Yeah, we'll be doing some more Valheim. We gotta go kill a dragon on a mountain, eh? Considered running a Call of Cthulhu or Ravenloft game. Oh, I want to play Call of Cthulhu. Let me play Call of Cthulhu. Work as a means to play. Yeah, I won't disagree with that. It's not the best means to play, but you know, gotta get the work done. Gotta get the work done. Unfortunately, having a house and buying food is
pretty important.
Pretty important in this society. I don't think too many people are gonna look after you, care about you, and if you don't have a house, then even less people care about you. So,
yeah, it's truly unfortunate.
Maybe make a list of the obvious problems with systems you do like, and refer to that list during the design process.
Not a bad idea.
Is somebody
it might help us?
Is somebody connected to this? That we can actually start putting some ideas down?
Well, we can just grab the major few. I mean, go, D&D.
Yep.
Shadowrun.
Absolutely.
I don't know if we want to touch Pathfinder or we can touch...
well, Pathfinder is D20.
Yeah, but it doesn't have still a few differences. It's not like the same as like a 5e.
Modified D20.
Slightly.
Yeah,
but,
and as Talesha says, most games are D20 because it is an open source system.
Yep. I realize. And it's not a bad one. Definitely one of the better ones out there.
Especially with 5e. Oh my god, I love 5e.
Yeah, it's just so simplified to make it accessible for everybody. It doesn't give everything that everyone wants. Rage, do you want to quickly throw up on the screen a... Yeah, I know WoD is D10s. I love WoD. We're going to take a lot of WoD influence in this game. I'm going to force it down everyone else's throats if they don't want it.
We want to solve... list. 5% crit success fail chance in D20. Too much math dice in Shadowrun. Too many rules in Shadowrun.
Don't worry, Kurokan, my WoD is delicious.
See, what else? What other problems are we trying to solve here? We're trying to have... we're trying to have a reward for high skill ranks. We're trying to reduce punishment at high skill ranks.
Yeah, I had a werewolf and a few vampires, but my favorite was my mage. And I don't care what anyone says, we're stealing the WoD skill system or magic system. And once
I actually haven't played WoD. I don't know what's involved in that.
Yeah,
once
neither
I
have
once I explain the WoD magic system to you guys, you're gonna be like, "Oh, let's play WoD." Changelings are cool too, but no, Mage the Ascension is where it's at. Mage the Ascension was the most fun I've ever had RPing a character.
So
OP,
what other
maybe.
what other design problems are we trying to solve here?
This isn't really a design problem. I'm gonna put it under truths. Balance is for babies in a non-PvP game. Saying it right now.
I somewhat disagree with that, because otherwise you get a party of all the same character and it's just not fun.
Well, you have to have a brain about it too. You don't want to have a Munchkin level character, but not everything has to be in perfect balance as long as they're fun to play and still have a value to the party.
No, it doesn't have to be perfect balance, but there is definitely going too far and not considering things.
Yeah.
Like the cleric in 3.5, for instance. You just roll cleric because it's the best class.
Okay, let's look at it as the difference between unbalanced and broken. We don't want broken. We can have unbalanced. Like, you know, in the world of RP.
So in my mind,
it's
we're
about how
looking
fun they
more
are to
at
play.
we're looking more at party balance rather than individual class balance, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
I'm just
let's
gonna add that to design problems. Prioritize party balance rather than individual character balance.
like, yeah, cleric is the way you go if you just want to win in 3.5, sure. But I'm still rolling a warrior. That's me. I'm a warrior.
Totally fine.
A PC should absolutely be on. Yeah, we're talking balance between the different characters for the player to choose from. Talesha. It's interesting that we didn't specify that. We just both instantly knew exactly what we were talking about.
We may have played a game or two.
We may have hung out together a little bit too. Anyone that owns Yahtzee and a notepad can play without having to obtain a bunch of dice. Yes. That's one of the goals. Not so much a truth, but a goal. Simpler to play for everyone when only using D20. How about a goal of only using what's around the house for like the average game house? Just like D6 and cards, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, those are the average, like, you play some board games every once in a while things to have.
Cards could be interesting.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Cards could be interesting, but it does make the game a little bit more difficult to play, because how do you deal with more than one person drawing from the same deck versus needing everybody to have their own deck?
Okay,
But you don't-
here's my approach to the cards for this project. I'm not trying to put them in. But if a situation arises where it sounds like it could fit, I'm not opposed to it.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to use cards in the sense of everyone draws from the same deck. You can just still use cards for like representations of things. You used to have 52 of them. You have 4 distinct kinds, and you have 13 unique values. So like it's just kind of a system you can build on top of that. You don't have to use it as like an RNG mechanic. You don't have to use it as like a single thing that everyone draws. You could, but there's a lot of other uses that you can use for it. It can fall into a kind of a classifier or categorization system that you can build off of, since most people have a deck of cards and you have quite a array of what to use with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, like using them as markers, for instance, for something, it makes a ton of sense.
Or even if you're using it in, different results or randomizations where you want 12 possibilities and give a type to each one. There's room for that. We can assume everyone has a poker deck. I'm not trying to fit it in because it sounds gimmicky. If you just shove it in, it's a gimmick. But if as we're designing it, we encounter a situation where we're like, we need something kind of like this, let's remember we have access.
Yeah. Because deck of cards and a bunch of D6 is pretty normal to have if you're even remotely interested in board games.
Did I add this in? No, I didn't. Create with only stuff found around the house. And we'll poll chat once in a while and be like, do you agree? Is this stuff average? But we're not even going to ask you about D6 in a deck of cards, because if you're saying that people don't have those in their house, you're either lying or you're wrong.
Or the people that don't have those in their house are not the kind of people who would be playing a pen and paper RPG.
That's a fair point, too. That's a damn good bit of data you got there, sir. All right. So, with this kind of laid out for now, we can throw more in when we want. But now we can talk about the skills a little better, I think. Oh, I got no water. I got ice water. So, do we want to compare die to die or total to total? What do you think, Chad, as well? Die to die reduces the variation, but is less instant math. Totals is going to give us a much more normalized middle range that becomes more and more normalized, even more so than die to die with D6.
But only at high ranks.
Well, it's
like it gives a significant advantage to somebody with even one more rank.
Oh yeah.
Significant.
Totals. Hey, Rube, welcome. I'm not against the totals idea anymore, honestly. I've been thinking a lot about it, and I think the idea that you only keep the amount of dice that they roll is the way to go.
And advantage would let the person with the player with advantage keep an extra die.
Roll an extra die.
Roll an extra die. Yeah. Yes, I like this.
See, yesterday we were all, or not yesterday, last week we were all arguing, and I told you, don't worry, we'll incorporate them all together, and it's been stewing in my head, and this is what pooped out.
It's amazing what just walking away from a problem for a while can do.
I do my best thinking in the bath.
So if we're going to look at using totals and reducing the number of dice rolls based on lowest or defender's skill level, then I think dropping the whole success failure idea.
Yep.
Other than
it's already
critical and success, critical and crit success.
So
like
my
crit success, crit fail. I think those potentially can stick around.
Yeah.
But we should probably drop the idea of successes versus failures on a single die.
Yep, that's gone. It's not a thing. Yeah, totally not. It's all about the total that you roll now. The biggest number you'll have to add to is 30 if you roll 5 6s, but then it's a crit success.
It would be 36.
Yeah,
because you start at rank 0, remember, and that's one die.
Okay,
and
so
you have 5 ranks in skill.
So here's my idea for crit success and crit fail. Okay. Crit fail your total doesn't count. You don't even take the 3 that you rolled off of their total. Or the 1 or the 2. You roll the 1 doesn't count, basically. If you roll all 1s, you don't count the 1s. It's not a huge penalty, but it's a bigger success. Maybe you can come up with something better. I mean, they've already failed, or actually at that point we can add in the excessive failure.
I think the die rolls should maintain, but when you critically fail or critically succeed, DM discretion on a thing.
Yeah. Yep, I agree with that, because then it's I don't like the idea of a table that you roll to see what happens. Let's leave it all in the GM's hand. And then just give a slight guideline of use some logic here. If a master of his field makes a error, he's not going to blow up the lab. You know, he's probably just going to fail the task. Or
So
a crit failure could be, because it has to be all 1s, right? All the dice rolled are 1s. So if you have 5 skill rolling 6 dice, that's a lot of 1s to roll. It's not going to happen very often at that point. So maybe it should be a little more catastrophic. What if it, like...
Well, I still like number of 1s equal to your skill being a failure.
Yeah.
Because there may be ways when we eventually get to equipment or buffs or whatever to add or remove dice from things. So I like that idea.
So,
But when you roll 1s equal to your skill, then I would say that we determine that as a critical failure and the GM gets to decide what that means based on context. Because if, like you said, if there's a grandmaster, scientist that rolls a crit fail, then, they dumped their serum that they're working on out rather than blew up their whole laboratory.
yeah, but if they... Okay, let me throw some numbers down real quick. I've got a hole in my head. Because as you know, all the numbers have to work together. So let's look at the total work, because you wanted a total work system real quick. So would be like if everything was a 6 times difficulty. I guess, no, that already factors in.
So everything can be modulo 6 for difficulty.
Just because that would be
I
one
don't
full
know.
die.
Yeah, I think allowing the DM the flexibility of saying, oh, you've got, 4 die for this. Let's make it a 14.
That would be really easy.
Yeah,
I
because
would consider that an easy
that's
one,
your
yeah.
median. That would be your mean distribution
Yeah.
difficulty.
Total work, difficulty times. Just a suggestion. Roughly, what would you be thinking? Each difficulty would be about how much work?
Well, I mean, whatever the median for the die is, right? Like you can't really take a median of a single die. So that's going to be arbitrary.
Mm-hmm.
The median of 2 die is 7. The median of 3 die is what, 10?
I'm not well, don't think of it as the median for the die, but how much work would need to be done for a difficulty 1 task, which would be typically for somebody with 2 dice.
I would say the typical would probably be 7. Because that's like, if it's something that you just need to do, you don't want it to be, something that's outside the realm of possibility, but then you need to modify from there, right?
Mm-hmm. keep in mind there's going to be an opposed roll, and
Yeah.
and we're thinking what counts towards the work is the difference between them. So a difficulty 1 task would be opposed rolling, you I'd imagine, with the amount of dice of somebody with that skill. So they would roll 2 dice. The task would roll 2 dice.
Yeah, this one is just so situational that I'm leaning towards leaving it to the implementer.
Well, how much... Because it can vary a lot on how much work is actually going to get done at this point. Like, you could easily roll double 6s and they roll a 2 and a 1. You're going to get like 9 work out of that. So let's look at it. Let's look at it optimal.
It is extremely low.
It is low.
Chance to roll double 6s.
It is low chance, but let's just kind of look at it in the extremes. So the most, like 2 6s to 2 1s, if we're just taking difference, would be 10 work. Would be like the most you could get in 1 turn. Super low chance, but it would be possible.
Whereas the median rolls for both is going to be 7.
Yeah, and when you both roll 7, you get 0. I bet you it's going to work better with like a 4 or 5.
Yeah, that's what I'm starting to think as well, just because we don't want these tasks to be too difficult. And the deltas are going to be pretty small, so I'm thinking maybe not exponential, but some sort of scaling, so some sort of sliding scale that follows either some sort of exponential geometric scale.
Let's just leave it at this for now. And when we play it, we'll quickly tell if we like it or not.
Yeah.
But it sounds not terrible. It works in the first few levels. We'll see, because once you get into like higher levels, you're only going to be keeping as many dice as you're rolling against the difficulty. It's just I've got 6 dice against a difficulty 3 task. The task rolls 3 dice. I'm probably going to get 5s and 6s for my 3 dice across 6 of them. More often than not.
Yeah. Well,
we'll see.
Not really. You're like still likely to get 3s and 4s average, but the
way it'll play out, I'll see them fairly often.
We'll need to play test it. I think it may be appropriate to bump it down to a 4, especially taking rank 0 into account, because rank 0 is going to be single die.
Yep. Well, we also don't expect a person who's never trained in something and has no skill to get a lot done if they went to do something. Like the guy who's never trained in computers before trying to access the network system, probably not going to get very far.
But we do want players to like not be trapped by lacking a skill and give them a way to chip away at it.
There's always the looking at a problem more creatively to use your strengths to it as well. And then there's also just GM design.
Yeah, well, we can't solve a bad GM at this level.
Yeah.
But I'm leaning a bit towards a 4 right now. We'll see how it plays out when we play test it.
I left it as a suggested 4 to 5 times difficulty, and we'll massage it as we go. Pseudo hasn't commented yet. It means we haven't said anything stupid.
No, I'm struggling to focus, but I haven't. No disagreement so far. I think it sounds good. Yeah, that's Rager's thing. I think we just need to play test it and see how that goes.
Yeah,
But,
yeah. You just need to come up with those first values to play test.
And this sort of goes back to the discussion we had previously on how quite a lot of game development is just play test and figure out what's kind of crap.
Your total minus opposed total for work done, right?
Yeah.
So, can the opposed roll crit? Or is the opposed roll just a value?
I would say that this is where we start to get into differences between a task and player versus player thing.
I don't want one.
Because, yeah, I know. That's where I'm saying that's where this starts to come in. Is if you're fighting another player, I absolutely think crits should be a thing. If you're like, if you are in a fight, even against a non-player character, crits, if they're going to be a thing, they should be a thing in both directions.
Yep. Okay. I can agree with this. Now, if we include crits in the opposed roll, where the GM gets to roll against you in the skills as well, its net effect would then have to be / should be double the chance for you to crit and crit fail.
So if they critically fail, if the opposed roll critically fails, then you only need to roll 5s on all dice
Or you just crit.
to critically succeed.
Or you just crit. You'd simplify it down to just the effect of a crit and a crit fail on an attempt, and have each person have a chance of triggering them.
I think that's a little complex. Like for something like a skill check, I think it makes more sense for the opposed roll to just be a target. And your roll, if you crit fail, you crit failed. Something bad's going to happen. If you critically succeeded, you critically succeeded. You did the shit out of that thing.
Okay. So, but the rules for crit have to work in the instance of being able to crit both ways anyway.
Yeah,
So
we do
let's-
need to work. We do need to work that out for combat. But for skill checks, I think it can just be a target.
Okay, so but I was going to say let's focus on the opposed player situation and then figure out if we want to simplify it for the other version, or if the added complexity of having to remember which is which is worth the simplicity.
Okay. So the way I'm thinking about criticals in either direction is to handle it much the way they do in D20, especially in 5e, because that is a way that's very simple to grok. You know, you get some more damage, and when you crit fail, something very bad happens, and your attack does not go through.
So failure is attack does not go through. Crit fail is something bad happens, and attack does not go through.
Yeah. Whereas crit success, or success is attack goes through and deals damage. Crit success is better than that. Like you get more damage.
But what about the player defending if they crit? What do they get?
I would say, oh, here's a thought. Here's a thought. What if only the initiator of the action can crit either way?
That's what I proposed at the very beginning.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, you said no.
I have no recollection of this. I believe you, but I have no recollection of this.
It's evolved since then, kind of where we're at. But yeah, that's what I was. Yeah, I did once kind of propose that, and then what I was gonna say, based on that, is if you crit succeed, the defend roll doesn't even count. You just get your whole total.
So I have. Oh, okay, so their memories are coming back now. I remember the reason I opposed it. It was because I wanted the defending player to also have that sense of agency in doing something very well. What would a critical defend do?
Well, if a critical attack in that context takes away all of the opposed number in the opposing roll, then a critical defend would take away all of the opposed number in the opposing roll, so it would just nullify the attack, basically.
That's one way to do it. I did consider that. The other thing that I was considering would be that it takes the attacker's action down a level. Like, it makes a critical attack a regular attack, it makes an attack a miss, and it makes a miss a critical miss.
That's a lot to... Then you have to memorize the order
Yeah.
of everything.
Yeah. I would like that in a video game, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't think it'll work in pen and paper.
That's how WoW worked. As you built your percentages for better chances on an attack against you, you would knock off the worst ones, so after you got to a certain amount of block and dodge, you could push critical right off the board, so you could never be crit by bosses. It was a great way to do it.
So I think the simpler way to do it is probably what we should go with initially, which is just if you critically defend, you get to ignore the attacking roll. And if you critically fail your defend, you do not do any damage negation.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to recommend for crit fail, is even... It's not a huge penalty, but even though you rolled ones, they still don't count. You don't even get the one out of it anymore. It's just whatever you were trying to do is zeroed. Do you want a chance for negative success? Because on skills it makes sense sometimes, but in attack it doesn't really. It's going to make awkward situations in attack, and if we include it, all of a sudden it's two different rules for different situations.
Yeah, I don't think negative success makes sense on what we're working on.
Okay, I agree. I just wanted to make sure everyone was in agreement with that one.
And I like that we still have a degree of success calculated on a single roll here.
Yeah, I know you wanted that. I made sure to factor it into the equation. It was an essential in my maths. We were getting it. Is crit success over 3 6s?
I do like over 3 6s because it makes it so that you can't critically succeed at lower levels.
Yeah. And it makes it easier to crit at higher levels.
Yeah. Ooh. So, in a situation where you are a master of whatever you're doing, and you are doing that thing against a difficulty 2 combatant, how do we reconcile that? How do we still give the advantage to the master?
He rolls 6 dice. He gets to keep 3 of them. He
He
has 6 dice to roll 3 6s.
And those 3 6s, if they are rolled, then take away the normal total calculation, and he just deals all 6 dice?
No, he deals his total roll, like, for the situation. So his total roll for the situation is 12, if you're only using 2 dice.
That just seems like punishment.
Yeah, okay. Well, it keeps damage in check because I don't want skyrocketing health totals. I don't think high level should have a ton more health than low level. I think they should just be better at resisting it. So if we keep the damage numbers in check by keeping the dice in check and the variance in check.
I understand what you're going for.
Mm-hmm.
It just feels like it takes away the motivation to get to those high ranks of skill.
But you're very rarely going to lose on any rolls at that point either.
Right, but like then criticals just don't matter to high rank people.
Well, you're still going to get a maximum, like, because it's not going to count for their total. They're probably going to roll at least a 7 on 2 dice. So it's an extra 7 on top of what you rolled, basically. There's a big swing there. But I'm okay with just when you crit, they all count. Make it for an all of a sudden, just punch the guy's fucking head off.
Well, and that's what I'm thinking, right?
Okay.
Like, if
You want the power fantasy.
yeah,
Okay.
like
I'm
it
good with that.
feels real good when you crit in a video game and you just fucking delete whatever's in front of you. Like that feels real good.
Okay, but the same way, if something hits you that way, it could delete you. Because we're using
It
the same
could
rules
be.
both ways.
It could be,
Yeah.
but it's very unlikely for your GM to have set up a situation in which you are fighting something that is significantly more powerful than you.
That's fair. We're talking significantly more powerful situations.
Yeah, like it would be like one of my characters fighting like a kobold or something in D20.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's fair. Yeah, okay. When you crit, they all count. Roll
I
over
like that.
3 6s, all dice count. All dice count plus opponent dice do not count. So it's either a super success, I take no damage at all, or, oh my god, I just absolutely obliterated that thing that I hit.
Yeah. And like it's the master art or blah, 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 blah. It's the master martial artist versus like the green belt, right? Like the master martial artist, if he gets a critical strike in, you know, you're not paying attention, you're not protecting a weak point, you're going to get demolished. But if the green belt does it, it's going to suck, but you might not be completely out of it.
So here's a real life example. When I was training in Sun Hang Do, I was training or sparring against Grandmaster Kang. He was going around the class and sparring with everyone one by one. And we were sparring, and I went in with a little fake and came in and backhanded him right in the forehead. And he just looked at me like... And then he flinched. Like, all I saw was a quick little flinch movement, like that fast. And he moved about 2 feet forward in that flinch, in under my guard, and he got me with a backhand right in the solar plexus. And that little bit of movement hit me so hard that I actually went backwards 4 feet and landed on the ground with my head between my knees. At which point he went, "Oh my god, are you okay?" It was the lesson to remember that, yes, you just got me, but don't forget who the master is. And that is exactly how it actually goes in real life when somebody of extremely high skill spars against somebody of moderate skill. Oh, I've never seen anybody move that fast in my life.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to watch a grandmaster of any martial art.
So yeah, that's kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about crits there. He basically crit me at will. Just chose to.
He rolled those sixes.
And used them. Whew. Man, it hurts even remembering it. Yeah. I think that's how we determine our work done and total work. And crits. Advantage
Ow.
and disadvantage.
Yeah, Punk, everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah, that hurts. My buddy had to drill more than a few holes into his nail when we worked together too in landscaping. Smack it with a brick when you're laying it or something like that and it just starts swelling. You got two choices. Drill into the nail and let the blood out, or lose your whole thumbnail. It's not a pleasant choice on the job site, but it's not a difficult choice either. Yeah. Advantage and disadvantage. We need to take a look at again.
Yeah, those don't make sense anymore.
Do we want advantage and disadvantage still? Or do we think that happens enough? Well, advantage and disadvantage is sort of meant to be by situation and
Yeah, I don't think that's
top of it.
captured by the skill system.
But what
I think rolling one more die for advantage and rolling one less die for disadvantage down to 1.
So if you have no skill, you can't be at a disadvantage? Oops.
You can't be at any less of a disadvantage. You're already at disadvantage.
That's fair. That's fair. You know what? Zero skill kind of is disadvantage. That's
Because you can roll a max of 6 and the mean is 7 for one rank.
well, they're just if you're so that math doesn't quite work with the current system when you look at it as keeping as many dice as they roll. You just have 2 dice to beat their 1 die at that point.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe disadvantage, advantage and disadvantage maybe works so that when you have disadvantage, the opponent gets a additional die.
And then they only get to keep the same number of dice, but they get an extra die to roll within that.
Yeah.
Okay. That's exactly what it already is. Gives advantage to opposed roll.
Yeah. So we just need to change our definition of advantage.
Adds a die to the die pool. So as we're adding and subtracting dice to the die pools, which is probably going to be what's going to be happening from now on, since we've got this lovely opposed system working, and adding and subtracting dice is going to be a great way to play with the calculations simply and on a low variance. How do you want to do it? Do we want to keep the number of dice equal to the skill or equal to the lowest dice rolled? What do you think, Pseudo?
Maybe skill.
Really? I was not expecting that. But that's the way that I was leaning as well. Because like, if you've put in the effort to get high ranks in a skill, you should like do well with it.
Yeah, I think that that makes sense. Less than just roll the die and more based on the actual skill when you've worked more towards that power fantasy we're going towards.
Okay, so you see if you have enough pluses and you're rolling like 8 dice and your skill's 5, you're still only going to keep 6 of those 8 or 6 of those 9. You'll just have a lot more.
You'll
I'm
just
good
get
with this.
higher numbers by doing it.
Yeah. Skill. I'm going to add it down here. Keep number of dice equal to skill pool. We're getting into dice pools. Lovely. I like this.
I think it's gotten a lot simpler than what we were talking about last time, and I think we're headed in the right direction.
Yeah. Big agree. Big agree. It's a quick bunch of D6. I got it. I win. I get this much. What do we want to work on next? There's a lot of stuff that we need to figure out.
So we've got to work on characters, equipment.
Let's do this. Design problems. Let's break below it. Oh, let's keep the current agreeances there. Then the skill. Stuff. So right here, let's add current needs. This is going to be a big list. Character creation. Character stats. Attack
Character abilities.
basics, character abilities, magic, class.
I was lumping that into abilities.
I always put
classes.
Magic deserves its own category because that's going to be its own fucking discussion.
So here's a question: do we want classes?
Yeah, it's a need to discuss at least.
Yeah.
Leveling.
Leveling / progression.
Yep.
It'll probably end up being leveling, but
No, I hate leveling. But it's still a form of leveling. But I hate leveling.
what else? What else do we need? We need to tackle movement.
Yep.
Creating enemies.
Do I have combat on here?
Not yet.
Combat. Creating enemies. Sounds like you like the Elder Scrolls style of leveling the skills and not the player. To say that I like the Elder Scrolls style would be a misnomer. Yeah.
But we like the idea of choosing where your progression goes.
Yeah. I really, really like Shadowrun's Karma Buy system. I think that was probably one of my favorites to really mold and shape your character within boundaries. And WoD did that pretty well as well.
But like most things in Shadowrun, it was way too fucking complicated.
There are simpler ways to do it.
Yes.
This is going to grow, but let's leave it at this for now. I can't shift tab. Okay, skills. This is all skills. So I'm gonna quickly do this and break it into its own file for now. Whip, P&P, skills. Bam. Preserved. I'll make all these shareable. Okay. What do you guys think? Stats? At the top.
Yeah, might as well start at the top.
It's a very basic one that really needs to be structured before we go too far. What do we like about stat systems? What do we dislike?
What do we dislike about stat systems? I like the idea of stats / skills influencing your rolls.
Influencing rolls. I'll throw a plus next to that for me. Do you like that as well, Pseudo? Stats influencing the rolls?
Yeah.
I think that's pretty given. Influencing rolls ++. Tell me that's wrong. You don't know nothing.
You don't know me. I dislike when they are used. When they are used in such a way that it limits you in your options. For instance, if you don't have, certain barrier, then you arbitrarily can't do the thing that you're trying to do.
Well, within reason. I like being able to try, and if you get real lucky, maybe do it, but
If
within
if you
reason.
don't have the skills to do it, you could still crit succeed and somehow manage to limp your way through the problem.
You can't crit
But-
succeed unless you have 3 dice, though.
Sure, the equivalent of that. Like, DM says, all right, you know what? If you roll a 6, I'll give it to you.
I think that's just being a good GM, and we'll have to disclaimer at the very beginning about how flexible all the rules are meant to be and how flexible all the values are meant to be, and if it makes more sense in your situation as a GM, then you should change it, and the player should refer to the GM and then the rule book, not the rule book then the GM.
Yes. Big agree.
But I do agree that you should always be allowed to make the roll. Even a level 1 warrior in Diablo 1 can still cast level 1 firebolt if he wants to. Yep. As long as he goes and gets it and has enough gear to bring his int up to the level that it needs to be. So how about stat modifiers? Do we like stats being modified a lot? I think it's kind of cool, like gear bringing up stats, and that doesn't happen a lot in like D20. Your stats are fairly static.
I like stat modification. I don't know how much it makes sense in our game, but I like it.
I think it depends on what we actually want equipment to provide and what mechanic equipment's going to actually do.
Yep.
And then from there, we can decide if it's going to do that. Because if we go that way, it's fine. It just requires quite a bit of balancing. You have to make sure that we're then going to be more of a loot-orientated and gear-focused kind of builds.
Which is fine. We just need to make a decision one way or the other.
So let's add loot to the current needs. Let's give a little bit of thought to loot real quick, because it does tie to stats quite tightly. No one's really ever done a looter pen and paper.
Isn't that like most? Like a lot of old school, at least D&D, was just trying to get the best loot.
Yeah, but it was always pretty sparse.
So if we wanted to create a system in which you're often getting you know, gear that gives you some sort of small upgrade. I think we would have to adjust how our skills work, because there's not a lot of like the delta between 6 dice and 7 dice is too big in my opinion.
Even when you factor in only keeping the amount of dice rolled by the lower number?
It changes the probability a lot.
Of crit successes?
Yeah.
The other thing we didn't talk about is what happens when both sides crit.
Up to DM discretion.
I would say that it just resolves as normal. Just with bigger numbers.
Well, probably ends up being 0 then.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, but probably.
Yeah, which is fine.
Yeah, okay. I'm good with that. So I like the idea of dice pools changing a lot. You know, adding and subtracting to the dice pools, because that's really easy, quick math to do. It makes it, it's a feeling like you can see you've gotten more powerful. Ah, look how many dice I have now. You're still limited by the total number you're going to get by dice being based on skill more than the total you're rolling. So there's a power check there. And then based on the total number of dice rolled, or lowest number of dice rolled. So there's another power check there for when you're getting too many. So we can pretty easily do stuff like, you know, plus to skill being extra dice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's... I worry about it getting broken in order to make gear feel meaningful, but let's try it.
Yeah.
And Punk brings up a interesting point where you can have affixes and prefixes on items. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's something we should look at for the loot system as well, see what we can do with that.
I was already going to say something like that too, Punk. You're with me. I wasn't thinking about this when we first started this, but this is what people love. People love loot. What do you think of, like, okay, so what happens when something drops in Diablo is a little roll goes on in the back for what the values are? What if there's some variance on the items, and when you find it, you get to roll some dice to find out what those values are on it?
To find out if your loot is any good.
That we can throw more loot at the player, and they can roll dice all the time, and it's like fucking Christmas.
Yeah, we would need to devise a rarity and affix table.
I think with pen and paper, lots of loot, if we go that way, gets kind of frustrating to manage really quickly.
If we don't want to go too overboard, I don't want like Neo levels of loot.
Yeah, but even just having, you know, rolling on something and it being useless and then trying to get it again, and it, you know, might be great. Like, we're going to get to a point where there's going to be a bunch of meh gear in an inventory, and then that kind of becomes a problem of, you know, there's not going to be any actual physical inventory management. It's just going to be up to the player, and actually a burden on the DM to track everything that's going on, especially if it's randomly generated or compiled in that sense. It can get a bit complicated a bit fast.
What if we approach it as it shouldn't even be picked up and carried with you if it's no good?
I think that would be kind of weird from a looting perspective, at least. I guess depending on how they want to define it, that like, hey, this is something that's like this thing dropped a thing, and we're just like, yeah. But I mean, I guess that's the case for most mobs you kill that are just wearing, you know, any sorts of gear anyways. It would just be a weird mechanic to basically implement something where, you know, there's a chance where it's just complete garbage and you want to throw it. But I guess if we balance with it going to be super good, it might be fine. But then we're kind of just having a bit of a slot machine on determining whether or not they're going to have fun in that drop.
I mean, people like slot machines,
Yeah.
but I've got like half an idea formulated.
Hmm.
What if the player so this would rely on classes, like the assumption that we're going to use classes.
Okay.
Your class has a table of affixes and prefixes that it can roll on, and that determines what effects an armor can have. You then roll for the value of that prefix or affix, and the number of prefix and affixes are determined by the rarity of the item. Like the DM goes, they beat a boss, I'm going to have a legendary drop, and whoever gets there first determines, which class it's for.
I think it's fine to have a more structured classic system with it, because the GM knows what he needs to drop. We don't need to put the work into making sure that whatever drops is going to work for whatever class, etc., etc. The GM just, this is going to drop. It's easy to just leave that to him.
Yeah, it doesn't leave a lot of room for homebrew items either.
We can just have some existing ones with variability as examples to encourage homebrew. Make your own with your own values. Kind of like having the 2d6. What if some skills were only available via an item affix?
I really don't like that.
Neither of us are big fans of locking out skills behind items. Let the players have their fun. A socket system where you can get mod drops, not just weapon drops. Let people craft their items. Crafting system, we can put crafting ?
As something to consider.
Yeah.
Crafting.
I'm not against the idea at
I
all.
love crafting systems.
Crafting would kind of get around that, we got needless loot, because there would be the opportunity to disassemble for materials at least.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. It does tie into a more hardy loot system. It lets you grab everything, bring it back, do an identify on it. So if we have an identified kind of idea for it, when you're adventuring through the dungeon, you're just sort of, you got dagger ? Tick, 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 tick. You don't even have to track it. I got this many of them. And when you get back, you identify them and you do the rolls for what they are after all the combat, after all the dungeoning, to allow the combat to go streamline more so.
One problem with that, in-field upgrades are exciting.
Okay. You don't need to be unidentified.
How do we deal with... I'm not against the idea of unidentified. I think that's kind of exciting because, you're done combat, whatever. You can just do a bunch of identify rolls and see if they're any good.
Handle the bulk loot.
Yeah, but how do we want to handle, a player like me who would want to, between breaks of combat, identify those items?
What if we just straight up completely rip off Diablo and do scrolls of identify?
That, or you can say, depending on how frequency and drops and stuff, we could do if there's going to be a bunch of junk loot, we can have some sort of sense of how many items you have that might be good, or not, so that if they have 5 daggers, not going to sit there and roll for 5 daggers while every other player is just what do we do?
Yeah.
But maybe have it sense where it's like if you can sense that this item is better than yours, which would make sense if you're a warrior. You pick up a sword, you don't know what it is fully yet, but you pick it up and like, hey, this feels pretty good.
That sort of goes to the quality system we were talking about before. So we can identify quality right away, but not details, basically, which I like.
Yeah, it just, I guess, the loot, we have to be careful if we're going to have like a bunch of loot, to be careful of, the burden of tracking that, because we're not going to have a computer system.
Yep.
And it's one of those things where like most D&D campaigns or most pen and paper campaigns I've played, no one's ever tracked arrows.
Yep.
You just have arrows because it's a pain in the ass to be like, I shot 1 arrow, I've got 29 left, and like, even though it doesn't sound so bad, when you're actually playing the game, it's incredibly tedious.
I've done it.
And you're just, yeah, and it's like, it's as long as we don't get to that point where all of a sudden every player needs to have like a printed Excel spreadsheet to have, what items we have, or have to have like some sort of computer assistance, we're fine. I think if there's like crafting, it's like, is it good, is it bad? If it's bad, into the wagon, continue on, or into my loot sack, carry forth, and then later on we'd go through like identifying as a simple phase, or, when significant drops, it'd be up to DM discretion to be like, hey, this is something good, so and so, because they'll know what's going to be there, and they can just be like, hey, so and so, gets a sense of, that's a pretty good item that they want, and then they can choose to identify it then, or save it for later.
So we could.
I don't think identification should be tied to a consumable. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah. Not only tied to a consumable, but be able to be acquired through a consumable for the characters that can't just do it.
I think everybody should just be able to do it.
Okay.
If it's something if it's something relevant to them, they should be able to just identify it. And it should take time to do, so that you can't like do it in the middle of combat. But you can, once you finish that engagement, go, that sword that I picked up was really badass. Let's go figure out what it is.
So then it's a skill.
Maybe I like that idea, but maybe you can just tie it into resting. Like when you do your rest, like your short rest, your long rest, you can tie in that when they're resting, they play around with this thing and figure out what the hell it is. Mm-hmm. And that gives enough time where it's not like mid-combat, they're like, it's like if it's consumable, mid-combat, they'd be like, hey, let's just do this. Or I think that might work, where, you can only do maybe 1 item per, short or long rest while in while sessioning. But when you're back at like, a town or back or somewhere, you can just do them all in a short period of time.
So doing it as a skill kind of answers both of what you're saying. It allows it so that in a short rest you can make a bunch of quick rolls. It's not going to take a long time, because the amount of work for... Maybe we should have identified how much work 1 round is. How much work a 1 round task is. That might be a better way to look at it for work done. You know what I mean?
Maybe. Like a combat round, or just like a instanced, like...
Yeah, one combat round. How much work?
Run.
One combat. Well, I guess we'll have to talk about what an initiate run is versus a combat round, but 1 turn of combat that you get. What kind of a work total do we want to be able to be theoretically done in that amount of time? Because I like the idea of the camp being able to identify them, but then also in combat, being able, if you have a high skill and you do open that chest and find something there, if you happen to know a lot about it, you may identify that fulminating potion immediately and be able to grab it and throw it. Whereas if you don't really know potions so well, you may not be able to identify what it is right away. You can't get all the work done. It takes you a round or 2 to go, oh, that's what this is.
I don't know if it should be like a separate skill. I'm wondering if it should just be tied to the skill that it's used with.
Yeah, I'm not saying necessarily a separate skill, just it sounds like a skill check. That's our skill check system is what was described, basically. So yeah, if you're...
But you can still grab and throw it at the risk it's a healing potion and you heal your enemy.
Yeah, exactly. You don't know what it is. Maybe you can identify it in time, maybe you just grab it and throw it. Player agency hasn't been harmed, it's just the amount of information you're getting in that time. And yeah, absolutely, the skill tied to the item I'm totally down with. So if you're a master swordsman, and you find a good sword, you probably will be able to figure out how good that sword is. You probably know your way around a sword pretty well.
Okay, so this doesn't work for consumable items, but let's do a little preposition here.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't laid out what our skills are going to look like yet. Like, is there going to be a swordsmanship skill? Is there going to be a, mace mastery skill, et cetera, et cetera? But for the sake of the argument, let's say that there's a melee weapon skill.
Mm-hmm.
You are in combat, you kill an enemy, and you know that that enemy's weapon has been dealing a lot of damage to your party. So you go and grab it as soon as you can. If you are of middling melee weapon skill, because that's where people are going to be most of the time, would that be this sort of deal where you're like, I know this weapon is strong, so I'm going to use it and immediately get that strong effect without knowing exactly what it's doing? Or am I going to have to spend a round identifying it in order to know what the effect is in order to get the effect?
So the preposition is, can a character gain an effect without understanding an effect?
Yeah. And if a player can gain an effect without understanding an effect, I think it should be more along the lines of, we restrict identification to certain rarity levels. Like, if something is very strong, then you have to identify it. But if it's, sort of just a middling item, then you probably don't have to identify it.
We could make an auto succeed for skills at a certain point too. Like if the total work needed is less than a certain amount of versus your skill kind of idea. That would take out a lot of tedious rolls, not just the identifying rolls. Where you're like,
I think a rarity system makes sense, and for lack of better way to describe it, let's just use Diablos for now. I would say anything like maybe yellow and above needs identification.
I like the idea of there being a point in rarity where if your skill isn't good enough, you can't identify it as well.
So you would have to take it back to camp.
Yeah, you'd have to take it to somebody who really knows what they're doing for them to be like, oh my god, what have you found? Because that's always exciting too. Like, yeah, sure, you find something good and you pick it up, and yes, this is better than what I'm using, let's go. But then there's also the, oh my god, what do I have here?
So, suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
We have 5 ranks of rarity. 1 for each rank of skill.
Okay.
Rank 0, you can't identify shit. You don't know what you're doing.
Yep.
Rank 1, you can identify first rank of rarity. Rank 2, you can identify second rank of rarity, etc., etc., etc.
So I'm okay with it if we can come up with a good layout for the 5 ranks. That makes sense. It is simple. Because that's a lot of ranks.
Because it is a lot of ranks, but it's the way to make the system the simplest, I think. Because like if you're rank 3, you can identify 1 and 2 just by picking them up. Rank 3, you need to spend some time on. That sort of thing.
I like that. I like the simplicity that it gives with the skills and for the identifying, because it is going to be kind of core. We're kind of, if we're making it a loot or pen and paper, loot is something they're going to deal with a lot, so it has to be quick and fluid and not tedious.
Which is why I like the idea of being able to just pick it up and use it.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of a round being your penalty for identifying something in combat. Because it takes you out of combat for a round, so you better be sure that that thing's going to be really good. But it's not going to wipe the entire team.
And I think if it's like,
If
you
it's
can think, oh, this is a level 3, thing to identify, then you're currently carrying a level 2, and you are level 3 now, and you've been looking for a level, you are level 2, but you are level 3, and you've been looking for a level 3 item, then you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe I should check this in combat, and then, help us get through this.
Yeah.
if it's lower than your skill, I don't think it should even take a round.
No, if it's lower than your skill, you just pick it up and you know what it is.
Yeah, even you could probably even identify it in their hands if you wanted to at that point.
That really complicates the encounter. Let's leave that out.
I'm okay with that, but I mean, that is something that some players are going to be doing, even if we don't include the rule in it. They're going to be asking, what's that? It'll happen.
And then
It'll
it'll
be
just
up
say
to
it's
the
like a
DM.
level 3, looks like a, quality 3 or whatever,
Yeah.
whatever the names we come up with sword. You don't have to like identify, because you're looking at it, and then they'll know, hey, this person has a decent sword. I want this, but that's about as far as that goes.
Yeah.
What about cursed items so there's a risk to just grabbing and using an item? Maybe. Maybe. I like the idea.
GM
It's
discretion.
ridiculous, but we would have to have some way to account for that. And the negatives, and it's if you're just grabbing and using something, I
would not so much
It's
curse,
tough.
but I wouldn't mind having, if we're going to go that way where there's some like risk to it, I wouldn't mind like quality. It can be a good sword, but maybe when you use it, it's just going to break, or maybe there's like, if you're not knowing what you're doing, it's not going to go well for you. So there's some risk to just doing something without fully understanding like what the weapon is.
Maybe you can't use an unidentified item.
Yeah, that could do it. Or there's a huge or is a disadvantage to it.
So I was thinking it depends on how we want to look at weapons and how you look at magical weapons. There's, you even if it's a sword, you may need to know how to use that sword to get the right effects out of it. There could be something to each one where if you don't know exactly what you're doing with it, you might not be able to get the effects out of it. The potential is within the weapon. You just don't know how to get the most out of it yet.
Yeah, that just gave me a brain image. So if you take a rank 3, because that's the number that we're using, sword to town, and you just happen to find it, and you get it identified by a master, you could use it, but it would only give you the rank 2 benefits. So like, say a rank 3 sword gives you +3 dice to your attack. You would only get +2 because you're only rank 2.
At first I didn't like it, but then I was kind of thinking about it as, give me that damn thing, you don't know what you're doing with it.
But like you were saying, the potential of the weapon is determined by its rank. So that makes me think like, okay, well, we have 5 ranks of weapons because we want to be able to identify based on what rank of skill you have. We have, an easy linear scaling here that we can implement. Just give more dice based on the rank of the weapon. But we can cap it to the character's skill level to make sure that you cannot compensate for having a very low skill at something by just having a really good weapon.
Yep, yep, I like it. I like it. So if you're at 5 and you have a rank 5 weapon, you could get 10 attack dice
Yeah.
out of it, and you get to keep 5 of them just from wielding that sword.
Yeah, and that's
a pretty good sword.
Like,
And that gives you
your master with a legendary weapon, sort of thing.
And it gives you that desire to get to the next skill level, to like fully utilize this thing. And an amateur using a master's sword is never going to get out of the sword what a master gets out of that sword, which is far more than he could get out of an amateur's sword. The logic is all there. And it allows us to do stuff like not necessarily have the plus to the attack. It could be a scaling thing where that sword will give you plus to whatever.
And that's just talking about like the quality of the item itself. That's not talking about the any affixes that we decide to put on them. Like affixes, I think, are the place where you would get like, +2 fire damage or +6 fire damage or whatever.
Yeah. Well, the affix affects what effect goes onto it, and then the rank affects how much effect comes out of that effect. Is how I'm seeing it.
How would that look? Because I don't think I'm understanding what you're suggesting.
So let's say, because you used fire damage, the fire damage affix is on it. At lower levels, it'll do +1, +2. And when you get it up to Grandmaster, it could be +5. Depending on the skill of the item and how well you use it. Once you've gotten it to if you're at 5 skill and it's a +5 weapon and it's got the fire damage, you can get the full bang out of the fire and you can do the full 5. Otherwise, you don't really know how to use it, but the fire's still there. You're just not optimally applying it. You're not optimally using it. You get less of an effect out of it.
I like it. We'll have to play with the actual numbers, I think. But I like the idea.
This way we could have affix/prefix for various effects plus from skill plus from weapon quality, ID difficulty from weapon quality, and weapon quality weapon quality scaled off of item skill.
So let's rewrite that a little bit more clearly, because I know I'm not going to remember this next week.
I will, but that's okay.
Let's say weapons come in rarity of 1 to 5. You must have rank 1 to 5 to identify that rarity of item. ID is instant if skill greater than rarity.
Yeah, I was going the other way around. That's fine. Does that make
skill
sense when you
plus
read it,
from-
Suda?
Skill plus from weapon
Yep.
quality makes sense because we're just scaling it the way a skill scales. Affix prefix for various effects makes sense.
Yeah.
It's simple. Just an affix, just a prefix. The rarity is just a 1 to 5. It's a plus 1 to 5 on all the effects. So it's just a quick, it's this and this, or it's just this, or it's just that.
Let's call out that the affix and the prefix also scale with skill.
Skill plus. Okay, so this is basically what that says, but I'll reword it.
Well, weren't you discussing based on the skill? Because
No,
if you have more skill, you
affix,
would get...
affix, basic, the plus to whatever skill was basically the affix prefix effect. In that sentence.
So like the +1 fire damage.
Yeah. Or plus to attack roll, or plus to weapon damage, or...
I find that wording very confusing, but if you can remember it, then good enough.
Okay. We came to a lot of agreement on this. I think it's a good place to stop for now.
Agreed.
We'll have
We've
to come
also
back
done
to
our 2
stat.
hours.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying I think it's a good place to stop for now. Because also every place I tried to order from was closed, so my dinner's being delayed here, and I've got to go figure that out. But that's a good 2 hours. We came to an agreement on a 0.1 for skills. We got the basics for the loot down to have more loot in the game, so more fun stuff found, some interactivity on what it turns into, and hopefully some streamlining on just recording it. You don't have to write it, just tick marks. I've got 4 of these and 3 of these, and we'll come to some other decisions on it. I'm sure once we start playing, we're going to be like, this is terrible. So
Yeah, I mean, all of this sounds great on paper until you actually play it, and it turns out it's shit.
yeah. But you got to start somewhere. I'm sure some of what we've got down here we're going to like. I'm sure of it. Plays well in the
I
head.
think the skill system with the D6s I'm going to like a lot.
Sounds great on paper until it goes to pen and paper. Yeah.
Exactly. Until that pen gets involved.
Damn pen. Well, thank you, Rage and Suda. That was a fun session. I thoroughly enjoyed that.
Yeah, that's good.
It was much more directed this time. Thank you, Pseudo, for suggesting that we lay out our design goals first.
I'm just glad I wasn't late this time. I managed to, or late-ish. I managed to sort out my audio stuff beforehand.
Nice.
I don't regret the last session. I think the arguing was fun. We got a lot figured out.
It was good. I think it could have been more productive, but it was good.
I think we'd learned a lot about where each other are at as well at that point. I got a lot about what your ideas were. My ideas were pretty off yours. I came in today with a very different idea what I started with. So, and I love where it went. Love where it went. This is why we're always saying more heads, more better.
To a degree. You definitely want differing viewpoints, but too many cooks in the kitchen is totally a thing.
There is too many cooks in the kitchen at a point. Sometimes you just can't make everything work. But 4 good viewpoints, unless it's a Hydra. More heads, more better for Hydra. Unless it's not your Hydra.
I'm just picturing what I did to the jet I made for Ace Combat, but with a Hydra version. I've just 100 heads. It's just got like a tiny little body and just like 100 heads just sticking out of it to the point where like it can't even function because like who controls the feet?
But it's just all the heads are so heavy that it just
Oh, God.
physically cannot pick itself up off the
God,
ground.
I'm picturing like a freaking Hydra democracy voting on like what foot they move when and how, all just happening in like an instant. A council of heads being like, no, we move left foot now. We turn
No,
left now.
we must move right foot now.
Just a slow moving Hydra because it just takes forever to process what the hell's going on.
I mean, that blue-green deck I have has absolutely had a Hydra with over 1,000 heads, so it's been a thing. So, Punk, Talesha, Kuro, thanks for all your ideas. You've been helpful. Not just a blast, you've been helpful in getting to where we are. I hope the lurkers are enjoying. Until later, when we're gonna go kill a dragon on a mountain, apparently.
Valheim progression.
Valheim progression. Until then, I've got to eat. So, I'm Deus,
I'm Rage.
And I'm pseudo.
and may all your shots be headshots.